All right, it's 6:45. We're going to go ahead and get it started. Welcome, everyone. My name is Emily Meeks, and I serve on the Intergenerational Council, and this forum is hosted tonight by the Intergenerational Council. That's right. My name's Ami, too. St. Mark's Cathedral acknowledges that we gather on the traditional land of the first people of Seattle, the Duwamish people, who are still here, and we honor with gratitude the land itself and the life of all the Coast Salish tribes. And I think if we want you to take away with one thing tonight, it is that intergenerational ministry is about relationships. And one of my favorite poems by John O'Donohue for celebration, I think really captures this as we turn to a moment of continued prayer. Now is the time to free the heart. Let all intentions and worries stop. Free the joy inside the self. Awaken to the wonder of your life. Open your eyes and see the friends whose hearts recognize your face as kin, those whose kindness watchful and near, encouraging you to live everything here. See the gifts the years have given, things your effort could never earn, the health to enjoy who you want to be, and the mind to mirror mystery. So tonight we're going to have a lot of time for conversation and learning. We're going to have some time to learn about the history of intergenerationality with Dean Thomason, some time to be able to learn about different words that we often use that actually mean very different things, and have some time for reflections from folks who really experienced intergenerational ministry and thinking about ways in which we can cultivate relationships and then reflect on how we've experienced intergenerational relationships. Turn it over to you, Steve.
Thanks, Emily, and thank you all for being here, and greetings to those on Zoom, Sue and Deborah as well. So I've been asked to give a little bit of just the background of how we got to intergenerational ministry being a focus here at St. Mark's. And the origins, I'm sure, go way back, long before what I'm about to describe. But in 2020, anyone remember anything special that happened in 2020? Nothing had happened, but after we closed in the pandemic, and we were trying to figure out how do we hold this community together, and how do we lean into what the church is going to look like in the post-pandemic era. I spent several months in 2020 engaging thought partners around the Episcopal Church. Jerusalem Greer on the presiding bishop's staff, evangelism, canon for evangelism, Scott Gunn, who is the executive director of Forward Movement, a kind of a clearinghouse of resources for spiritual formation, several others, including several priests. And in the thought partnership, I was using the word innovative. I want to figure out how St. Mark's can be innovative in what is going to be this post-pandemic era. We weren't using that term yet, of course. And the word that I kept hearing from these really seminal leaders in Christian formation, they were using the word intergenerational. I had not really heard that word prior to 2020, and it was not a word that was prevalent in the communications across the Episcopal Church like it is now. It's kind of one of the hot button words of ministry these days. But coming out of that, it was one of our mutual ministry goals that we laid down, that we wanted to develop and engage and resource intergenerational ministry so that we would turn from the silo of children's ministry or children's and family ministry and youth ministry and adult formation that all kind of ran parallel to one another, but not really overlapping. And the opportunity for us to see how these relationships that Emily mentioned, how we can engage across the generations in meaningful and relational ways. And so that became one of our 3 mutual ministry goals in 2021 that has then served us for 3 years now and still informs the mutual ministry goals for this year that the vestry has adopted. So with all of that, in the 2021 cycle, we developed a position for Canon for Intergenerational Ministries, and we did a national search, nationwide search across the Episcopal Church in the U.S. And the person that we had that was called to be here at St. Mark's was none other than Wendy Claire Berry, coming from Brooklyn, New York, and she was serving a church in Manhattan at the time. I can't tell you how remarkably dynamic the opportunity to consider intergenerational ministry is when we have someone on the leadership team that brings that perspective at every turn. And so we're not talking silos. So historically, we would think, for example, Evensong Choir has children and youth and adults in the choir, but it was a music ministry, full stop. It is a music ministry, but it is not music ministry, full stop. It's an intergenerational ministry because the relationships develop. And when I went on the pilgrimage 2 years ago with Evensong Choir and forged some relationships that here tonight, Josette, who's in college now, comes back and we high five together, we catch up. And I said, "What are you doing tonight?" And she says she's actually going to sing in the choir. And so she's coming. So all of that, those relationships is where it counts. So let me just name it that, name the gratitude for Wendy being here and for guiding us in this in a tireless and passionate way. And if we go back, if we kind of come full circle, intergenerational is not what I had in mind when we started that thought partner conversations. Innovation was, but I think this is an innovative way of being the church in the post-pandemic era. And I think other churches are catching on as a result. So thank you, Wendy.
I'd love to invite you all into some conversation with one another. Oh, yes, I will. My name's Hannah. I also serve on the Intergenerational Council. And we want to talk to one another and think a little bit about intergenerational relationships. And so I'm curious if you take a moment at your table and share or describe a transformative intergenerational relationship that you have had with a non-family member. So somebody that you are not related to, that is of a different generation. Talk a little bit about that. Who were they? What was transformative about that relationship? And let's take 10 or 12 minutes and share together at our tables about those relationships. So as you wrap up your conversations, I'd invite us back to the large group. That was very abrupt. What did you notice amidst your conversations? I'm curious, like, what did you notice? This is very loud. What did you notice as you were sharing with one another in terms of your conversation? Were there themes that you noticed amidst all of your stories about how these relationships unfolded or impacted you? What takeaways or?
Hannah and I noticed a lot of laughter.
Well, I'd say with all of us, the relationships were very special and in many cases filled something in our lives that we weren't getting in our family or our school, and where there was just an atmosphere of connection across these generations and across these relationships that was very special to everyone, correct?
Yes, that's true. And I think the laughter came partly at the end from generational differences of realizing that the language and the experiences are different, but that's the richness of it too.
Thank you. Zoom friends, would you like to share what you noticed? What connections or themes? might have come up?
Hey, Wendy, yeah, this is Doug. You know, both those of us on this call were, I think, we sort of third actors, elders. And, I was talking about on Sunday evening, being with the 20s and 30s group, doing poetry and spirituality. And then, both Sue and Deborah were talking about just the pleasures of having little kids around. And all of a sudden, we're also thinking, wait a minute, we're maybe, I don't know about Sue, but Deborah and I are in our very early 70s. And, we're also thinking about, Dick Carter and Jane Carter. And, Dick's 94, right? And so I was talking to Jane on Sunday and just touching base about how Dick is. And it's like, oh, yeah, that's right. It's like we're the young pups compared to them. So it goes both ways.
Yes, thank
Right,
you.
Deborah? Sue?
Yeah. Both Sue and I had, not to speak for you, Sue, but we had intergenerational experiences built into our work. So.
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you. That's an important context to name. Anyone else like to share? Welcome.
We talked a little bit about how in Seattle, especially like church is one of the few places where there's space for intergenerational community, and just in the sense of being able to be with different ages, that there's a lot of different segmented opportunities, but the church is this true opportunity to really experience that in organic ways.
Thank you. Anyone in this group like to share?
That one of the common threads was that we establish these relationships and then life gets in the way and you move away, or, you go on to something else. But those chance encounters later on, when you do see each other and recognize that relationship again and catch up and, realize that time and distance doesn't always interfere with that relationship.
I'll pose this as a question. If your spouse has a major birthday turning to the next decade, 6 months before you do, does it become an intergenerational marriage?
I think
Oh, Steve.
we're gonna collectively plead the fifth on that one, and let you all sort that out. Oh, okay, great. Great. Well, thank you all so much for sharing that. We'll have some more time to talk in a little bit, but I'm going to turn over to Wendy.
Yeah, maybe some people will talk and others might take some time. I think most of you know I'm Wendy Claire Berry, canon for Intergenerational Ministry. This is my dream job. I grew up in an intergenerational church, and this is what formed me. My church was St. Mary's in Laguna Beach, California, and I started attending there when I was 2. It was a really special place, and I don't know that we knew at the time how special it was. I remember the sound of the Sanctus bells, and I remember incense and people coming down the aisles in flip-flops and cut off shorts and t-shirts, because of hello, this was a beach community. And I remember pancake suppers and making Advent wreaths. And I remember the first time I read a lesson from the lectern. That was a big deal. At 10, I was paid to help work in the nursery. I helped Miss Gigi, and I gave babies bottles and read books and sang songs. And I knew this is how I was to show them God's love. 50 cents an hour. It was also a big deal. By the time I was 14, I was teaching Sunday school. And I was on the church's Christian Education Committee, which met on Sunday afternoons so that I could attend the meetings. And I sang in the choir, which was adults and teenagers alike. And at about that time, my parents separated, and for a few months, my mother was too sad to go to church. And I got on the bus and I went by myself because I was pretty well convinced they couldn't have church without me. I thought I was needed to make church happen. And what a gift that was to me. I also was in a community that that really emphasized God being big enough to hold us in our questions. And so I remember my confirmation class in those days. This is how old I am. The Episcopal Church asked you to wait until confirmation before receiving communion. So I was 11 years old when I was confirmed, and the adults who were teaching my confirmation class gave us big words and concepts like transubstantiation and consubstantiation. And I was just in awe that they thought that we were ready for this kind of conversation. It was really exciting to me. I was also, you know, a nerdy kid, church nerdy kid. But I had adults who let me know that God was big enough to hold me in my questions, and that I could and would be a faithful Christian, even though those questions would continue throughout my life. That was the expectation, that I would continue to wrestle with scripture, with matters of faith, all of that. This was really good news for teenage me. But that's the church I grew up in. Churches are one of the few places left in society that are naturally at least multi-generational. So I want to talk about the differences between being multi-generational, cross-generational, and intergenerational. And Greg has a flyer. Hannah or Emily, could you come up? I counted them into sets, and everyone can have one to take home, because I think this is important enough that you might want to think about it. In a multi-generational environment, we are engaging next to each other. We are not cross-generational or intergenerational yet. We just have multiple generations present, and you know, possibly doing the same thing, but not together. In a cross-generational environment, there's some crossing of boundaries. But in an intergenerational environment, there is comprehensive mutuality, reciprocity, and equality. So this is really important. And this comes from this is published by the Uniting Church in Australia, and Chris Barnett was one of the speakers who joined me last Thursday for a conversation about intergenerational ministry, along with Valerie Grissom, who's local to Seattle, but they're both thought partners in this international intergenerational conversation that's going on across denominations and across the world, which is really exciting. If you flip over to the other side, you will see this fantastic little drawing where you see that in multi-generational environments, it's this drawing right over here with the circles that aren't really connecting to each other. They're just next to each other. There's tolerance, there's living alongside, there's polite interaction. A cross-generational environment, you see some arrows that are going around. There's some sharing, some listening, some learning, but no transformation yet. And an intergenerational environment has comprehensive mutuality, equality, and reciprocity, and that makes transformation more likely. And of course, you'll see that final diagram of intergenerationality is a mess. It's a little chaotic. And that is a true thing about true intergenerational environments. They can get messy. They can get a little chaotic. That is, I'm naming a reality here. But that the idea that the relationships are polydirectional, and that your age does not necessarily mean that you are not also a recipient of wisdom and insight from people of other generations. There's all kinds of connection and learning and engagement going on when we're truly intergenerational. So what Chris has taken this from the United Church of Canada, who used this model to describe being multicultural, cross-cultural, and intercultural. And so that's where this comes from. And the point that is made very clearly, and I'll read this to you. In essence, the trajectory from multi to inter involves a greater depth of relationship, a change in the nature of the relationship, and an increasing openness to being changed through relationship with the person who is not like you. All right. So I think this is very exciting, that this deepening of relationships causes transformation. That's been a big theme of ours in this last year. That was the theme of our strategic planning committee, and is, I think, woven all the way into the strategic plan we're working with now. I, at this point, would like to invite some people who are on our Intergenerational Council, or who have been on our Intergenerational Council, to come and tell you a little bit about how they've been transformed. And Natalie, because you have Mia, and Mia may at some point need to go home and go to bed, I'd like to invite you to speak first.
Yeah, okay, that's great. I'm Natalie Tapias-Willis. This is my daughter, Mia, my husband, Tim. How have I been transformed by intergenerational experiences here at St. Mark's? I think when I first joined this community, I really was looking for a community of people, specifically in their 20s, to be friends with, to grow with. And over time, as my life circumstances have changed, Tim and I got married, we've had Mia, I've come to realize that we really need the support and the wisdom of those who live in this community with us, who know us and who love us. So it's not just for myself, this transformation, it's also for my daughter and for my family, that we can benefit mutually. I think that she delights everyone, I hope. And I think that she benefits from being known and being loved by everyone in this community. Thank you.
She's absolutely welcome to stay there. Everyone likes looking at me. Thank you, Betsy. I'd like to invite you to come and speak. And please introduce yourself.
I'm Betsy Bell. I think I know most of everybody in the room. Been around here for a really long time, and I was thinking I would like to share several intergenerational experiences. Last week, we buried Ib Rawson. Ib Rawson and his wife, Ellen, were here at St. Mark's in 1969 when my husband, Don, and I and our 4 daughters showed up. And Ib was almost 100 years old. We're going to celebrate his 100th birthday in September. And our children knew each other. We're on the altar guild. I mean, not the altar guild, carrying the flag around, and all the acolytes. They were acolytes together. And lo and behold, two of his son and my daughter got married to each other. And the same happened with another daughter of mine, and the son of Murray Trelease, who was a priest here at St. Mark's when we moved to Seattle in 1969 and came, before our furniture even arrived, came to the cathedral because someone in Kansas City had told me, "You'll be okay in Seattle. Your people are at St. Mark's." Because I didn't want to come. I was on the Planned Parenthood board in Kansas City and just had a career. And so this was it was a big change to come here. So that's, I'm sort of a living proof of what intergenerational church can do for families. And then my second husband, I also knew here at St. Mark's. His wife was one of my closest friends, and our children, a couple of our children dated each other. And when our spouses died at the same time, we got together to talk about what it was like to care for long-term illness and to comfort each other. And after 4 years of just sort of managing our own grief, we realized that we were pretty much entwined and had a wonderful, wonderful 10-year marriage. So that's one aspect of it. Another aspect for me, and I think this is an opportunity for lots of people in all ages, is to experience the transition that someone close to you is making from male to female or female to male. And during the pandemic, one of my grandchildren came to live with me as he was transitioning. And it was a profound experience. When she left after a whole year, she said, "Well, Grandma, I came here as a 9-year-old." I said, "No, you came here as a 13-year-old, and God had it in for me. I didn't do very well with my own daughters when they were 13, 14, and 15. So he gave me a second chance. And I really appreciate the fact that you've been here." But I remember one day she was standing in a dress. She's 6'4". She's standing in a dress cooking. And I said something with he. She says, "Grandma, you don't see me as a woman, do you?" I said, I'm working on it. You're my first grandchild, and I've known you. You're 27 years old. And I've known you your whole life, so I'm getting there." So I think it's been helpful for my daughter, her mother, for me to have this role, because she's still struggling, and it's just we have this opportunity when it shows up to be curious and present and open to the young people around us who are going through tremendous change, whether it's whatever their change is. And I found that to be true here at St. Mark's. Wendy asked me to come one time to meet with the Scola. Normally, I don't know what they were doing, what they did normally, but she asked me to meet them, and she knew that I had this this prayer that I do and some Qigong practices. So I got them all doing that with me. But before we started that, I just sat down on the floor with them. They were kind of hanging out. And we talked about the faith journey, my own faith journey. I left the church for a while because my own growth made it uncomfortable for me to be here during when it was so patriarchal. And I went away. I've tried Buddhism a little bit, and then I formed a Wicca group. And we met all the Sabbats. We celebrated all the Sabbats and did all the rituals. And I was talking to them about that, and they were really interested in the capacity to be curious and to explore, and then to come back and find this a welcoming place for women and for other, for trans people, for gay people, for anybody, which it just didn't feel that way for so many years. So I think the intergenerational part of that is to not wall yourself off in your own age group. Now, mind you, I have my soul sisters. We're all over 80. We meet every 2 weeks. We started that in the pandemic. We met every single Saturday night during the pandemic, a glass of wine in front of our own computers, to talk about what it was to age and to be alone and to be isolated And we're still talking about that. Where are we going to live till we die? How do we honestly approach this whole experience of feeling ourselves diminish and become less of who we have been? And it's wonderful to have a group like that to share with without embarrassment. And we cry and experience this. It's hard work getting old. And if you pretend it isn't, then you're in trouble. So anyway, that's enough from me. Thank you for giving it. Thank you for giving me a chance to say something.
Hi, I'm Martha Craig, and I'm the liaison from the vestry to the Intergenerational Committee. I was asked to share a personal reflection on the intergenerational ministry, and I'd like to begin with a confession. I've been a member of St. Mark's for nearly 23 years, and although I'm now have this new assignment that I've been working on with Wendy, up until very recently, I had no idea that there was an intergenerational ministry or what that meant or what impact it could have on us and on St. Mark's. When I began my first ministry here, singing in the choir, I chose it because I love to sing. It just happened that the other choir members who share my love of singing included several college-bound teenagers, grad students, retirees, new parents, mid-career teachers, and when we collaborated with a choir school, young children. We worked hard, explored centuries of Anglican music, worshiped and experienced the divine together, and shared our music with the St. Mark's community. Over the years, my way of identifying my fellow choristers shifted from, for example, that college girl to that soprano who can really hit those high notes on the Allegri Miserere Mei, and whose parents lived 2 blocks from me in Kirkland, the gal I met with to work out the notes on the Poulenc. So I saw individuals instead of categories of age. In other words, I got to know her. My choir mates, through our shared ministry, became people I cared about and respected because I knew them and valued them. I embarked on my Eucharistic visitor ministry as a second/chauffeur to a choir friend who didn't have a car. My goal was to be helpful in extending the St. Mark's community to parishioners who were unable to worship with us in person. The Eucharistic visitor I accompanied was around 35 years younger than me, a sparkling, creative, and intelligent person. The parishioners we visited were often decades older. I initially thought that our ministry was a one-way street. We were bringing the Eucharist to them, after all. What I hadn't considered was all they were bringing to us, the wealth of experience, their courage, and their hospitality. I can assure you, we were just as blessed by these parishioners as they were by our visits. As a member of the Radix Planning Committee, I've also had the privilege of collaborating with a multi-generational group, or intergenerational group, I should say, and benefiting from our diverse perspective as we brainstormed themes and developed content together. And in my role as Radix facilitator, I've connected with St. Markians of different generations to explore themed scriptures, share often deeply personal experiences, and pray for each other. Those of us who are Radix veterans know how the daily practice of praying for someone can truly deepen your connection to them. So in closing, here is my advice to you. Think about participating in activities, events, and ministries that align with your passions and gifts, but also put you in contact with people of other generations. They have a lot to teach you, and you have a lot to teach them. Not only will you feel the impact of these connections in your spiritual life, you can help transform St. Mark's into the beloved community it was meant to be.
Thank you so much, Natalie and Betsy and Martha. I want to talk for a few minutes about what we can do, what to notice about flourishing intergenerational communities. And there is a great chapter in a new book, a newish book called The Generative Church: Global Conversations about Investing in Emerging Generations. And I wrote this up for the vestry a couple, maybe the spring after I arrived, to start thinking about intergenerationality. But I think it's important to share with you. And the first three factors I'm going to talk about from this chapter of this book by Joe Azopardi and Cale DeWall, who are both in Australia. The first three factors are progressive steps towards building a healthy relationship. But the last two factors I want you to notice are concern inclusivity, which is an essential characteristic of a Christian community. So something that we, creating intergenerational community here at St. Mark's, need to pay attention to. So the first factor won't surprise you. It's found in any healthy community. It's positive interactions. And I think we have positive interactions galore. Without relationships, there can be no interactions, positive or otherwise. So the first thing we must foster are authentic relationships, and we gravitate towards those who are most like us. And I would like you just to notice where you're sitting in the room. So we kind of did this naturally of finding people who are like us. And sitting there, and that's fine. It's just to notice that to become intergenerational, we have to push past our natural inclinations to be with those whose ages, interests, and backgrounds are most like ours. And we must seek out and start conversations with those whose experiences are not like ours. And here's a quote from this chapter: positive interactions done regularly with intentionality are likely to elicit meaning and purpose, which lead to the other four factors found in flourishing intergenerational communities. And I have a handout that I will give you at the end here. The second factor is connectedness. Intergenerational churches strive to help every generation feel as though they belong and are accepted at their own level. It's part of what defines intergenerationality itself. And once positive interactions become the norm, the age-diverse congregation becomes interconnected with each other. The interconnectedness leads the congregation to interdependence, where we discovered that to be church at our best, we need each other. Interdependence is also how we understand ourselves as the body of Christ. You know that passage, right? So someone quick. The hand and the foot and the body. Yes, that one. The fourth factor and the fifth factor are much harder and require more transformative work. And we're definitely not there yet, but I'm going to name them just so you know. The fourth factor is empowerment. These are the two, this is the 4 and 5, remember, are the ones that are about inclusivity, which is an essential characteristic of a Christian community. So churches that are fully intergenerational have leaders who are willing to give authority to people from a variety of age levels. If intergenerationality is a core value of a community, then every generation should have the opportunity to participate in all ministries and, when possible, to lead those ministries. So for young people to develop responsibility, they must first be given responsibility. And that's scary. I'll just say that. It is scary. But mentorship is what allows ministries to achieve continuity, and sharing power means that some people can compensate for the weaknesses of others, which is another example of what it means to be the body of Christ. Accommodation is the fifth factor. It means giving up something for the benefit of others. The perspectives and needs of every generation should be considered equitably, which is not the same as equally. Sometimes the needs of one generation will take precedence over the needs of another. Accommodation always requires empathy, and it often asks us to sacrifice or surrender, which is, in fact, the way of Jesus. So I'm going to give you that handout while Emily comes and talks to us a little bit about how to cultivate intergenerational relationships with intentionality.
So I just have 5 things that I wanted to share, like 5 takeaways. I'll start, I'm kind of going non-technology here, but I have, so I work at St. Mark's and staff support for 20s and 30s. And one of the things that I did when I first moved into my office is I just put on my whiteboard pictures of ministry moments that make me remember why I do what I do or why I come to work. And one of my favorite moments in the whole history of my St. Mark's time is an experience with Pat Taylor. I can pass this around, but Pat Taylor and I discovered that we really like making cards. So I'll just pass this around. Slideshow. We discovered we really liked making cards during the pandemic, and she was really quick to give me feedback on my cards. And she let me know when they were weird or when they were okay. But I remembered this about Pat, and the tip that I would share here is around finding shared activities. And so this picture is of the Not So Quiet Day. And I invited Pat to come join me to help host the table. It was an activity that Wendy was running. And Pat Taylor at that table that day had everyone roiling in laughter. I mean, every single moment was just a joke or a story. And it was such a gift to be able to be in conversation and relationship with her that day and also with others. So that tip of finding a shared activity and being able to find connections of ways to be able to experience with others. Second, be flexible. Sometimes working with different age groups means bending and flexing to what your preferences may be. And just a huge shout out to Doug, actually, because he really picked this up this week, where he mentioned the 20s and 30s poetry and spirituality gathering. And there was post-conversation around having an event with the third actors group. And so he was helping to coordinate it. And one of the questions that came from the third actors is, well, how will 20s and 30s meet during the workday? And Doug said, they won't. We'll have to change our time. And it was such an illuminating moment just to be able to see someone like express what we needed in order for us to be able to find a time to work together. So we're working on that. So be flexible, find shared activities. 3, a lot of times people come to me as a 20s and 30s staff lead and say, how can we get 20s and 30s to be involved in this? We invited them to this, but they didn't show up. Aren't they interested in X, Y, and Z? And it doesn't just work like that. And one of the ways in which you can really think about planning is to invite people into the planning process. And so one of the ways in which we did this year was with the Urban Birding Day, which is coming up on May 25th, where we started thinking about ways that we could increase awareness about the Greenbelt and the Loeffler Garden. And we knew that bird watching is an activity that many different people of all different ages enjoy. And so instead of just me and someone else planning the event, which as an aside, I know nothing about bird watching. I just enjoy birds. But David Portinga, who's in 20s and 30s, led a bird walk several years ago, and he did a great job, but it was a very 20s and 30s focused bird walk. So we invited David in. Phil Fox Rose is a birder, and he is not in the 20s and 30s. And Jacqueline and Gordon Miller are bird watchers, and they are not in the 20s and 30s. And then Wendy joined as well. And so we had a planning group come together to talk about what was needed for this to be an intergenerational event versus just a 20s and 30s event. And each of those members gave feedback. And what resulted was we wouldn't just have one type of bird walk, we would have 2. And we would also have an activity that would thread throughout the morning so that people could participate in a different way as well. And so it was a great example of taking an initial idea and really tweaking it a little bit to consider the different audiences that you wanted to be there. And I would also just reference that intergenerational doesn't mean that you have to have someone from 0 to 90 there. It could just mean you have 2 or 3 different generations present and you're thinking about how they would best respond to that. 4, consider the goals of the event. It kind of connects to what I just shared. One of the things that our 20s and 30s group visioning team has been doing this year is really thinking through, does this event need to be a 20s and 30s event? And can it be an all parish event? Sometimes things are very specific for conversations, especially for people to feel safe as we talk about topics that are really intimate to our spirituality. And so that makes sense for something to be specific to an affinity or an age group. But sometimes it's an activity that anyone can enjoy and participate in. And so one example where I was really proud of the group for thinking about this differently was with our Spreadable Hope event. So Spreadable Hope is an event we started to support St. Luke's and Ballard, their Edible Hope feeding program. And we had a group who was interested in decorating cookies to be able to donate to Edible Hope and to decorate them together. And it's great fun, but 20s and 30s aren't the only folks who can decorate cookies. And so one of the things that we did this year is with Alternative Christmas Market, we folded that into the activities. And then through the strategic planning process, we learned from youth at St. Mark's who aren't involved in choir that it can be a really lonely time at the 10:10 hour if you're not in choir. And so we engaged some of those youth who wanted something to do during that time. And so they helped us staff the Spreadable Hope cookie station, and it was great fun. And they had a lot of really good ideas for how we might show decoration. And then lastly, be explicit in the naming of the event. So if it is for 20s and 30s, and I'm using 20s and 30s examples because that's sort of my context of focus, but if it's for third actors, be specific. If it's for 40s and 50s, be specific. But if it is open to all, consider saying hosted by 20s and 30s, all are welcome. Another thing is that it doesn't just show up in explicit language. Sometimes things can imply a certain demographic or a certain group of people. So for an example of this from our staff last year, we changed the wording of the blessing of the backpacks to all parish picnic. And blessing of the backpacks was in the description, but the headline wasn't blessing of the backpacks. Because if you ask a lot of folks who are 20s and 30s and 40s, they may not be in school and they just think about, well, that event is for kids or for families with children. And so it was fun to be able to see how this year that actually reflected in who attended, and even in hearing and conversations of, wow, all parish picnic, I want to come to that, and it not being associated just with kids, but not excluding kids either. So just as a quick recap, find shared activities and invite people in, be flexible and adjust your preferences, invite people into the planning process, consider the goals of your event, and be explicit in how you name and communicate the event.
Thank you for that. Well, I was, yeah. I'm going to ask you to probe just terminology matters, words matter. So what does it mean to say children's and family ministry, family specifically? What does it mean to say young adult versus 20s and 30s? What are some of the words that we've either through the years grown accustomed to, but may be unintentionally discriminating against some people? So,
yeah, I appreciate that question. So one example of that is at St. Mark's, we call the group under 40, 20s and 30s. We never really reference ourselves as young adults. People outside of 20s and 30s reference us as young adults, but that's not a term that resonates with us. And it also feels a little bit subjective. As like a 41-year-old, a young adult, and not a 39-year-old. And what's the difference there? So that's something that I think is specific to our culture. One example that Steve just shared that's very specific that I relate to is how the church, not just St. Mark's, has often used the word families. Oftentimes families can be in context that just implies children. So I will have people within the church say, so when are you going to start a family? Or this event is for families, implying that there are children there. And I don't have kids and I don't feel called to have children, but I have a family. I'm married to a wonderful person and we're a family of two. And so when you say something like implying that I haven't started a family, or you're implying that it's for children with families, there's some sensitivity and nuance there. Also, not all children have families, unfortunately, that may relate to how we think about families. So that, I think, is an example. From another age spectrum perspective, the word seniors, even though it can be a term that culturally is used, from my experience in the Medicare space, older adults is something that is used more widely and referencing or elders, but really thinking about the ways in which we want to be called and communicating that. So I don't know, like I'm not speaking for you, Betsy, on that, but I think sometimes the ways in which we reference age, thinking about ageism, oftentimes you'll hear in conversation like, oh, I'm too old for that, or I will like hear something that discriminates because of someone's age. And I'll tell you what, Betsy Bell can hike probably more than I can, and she will school me. And so
further and faster than most of us in this room.
So really being open to the ways in which we're referencing age is not something that is a limiting factor, or even on the flip side. On church and on Sunday, there were several people who were serving at the 9 a.m. service. And I heard so many comments around like, isn't it cute or isn't it precious? And like, yes, it is all that, but that's also not the reason why it's great that they're serving. Like these kids are not a token in worship. They're here being formed as siblings in Christ, not to be ornaments of cuteness. And so I think the ways in which we think about the ways that we're referencing folks and we describe things related to age are important. So good.
Thank you. Something I will name is that ministry with children and families is always, ministry with children and youth is always intergenerational, because adults are always involved in that. But intergenerational is absolutely not code for children and youth. Hannah, we're going to have one last breakout group. You saw that some people left. That's because they're going to choir rehearsal. And we designed this program knowing that that would happen. We will not keep you any longer than this takes, but we do have a final breakout question.
So I'm going to first invite you to do something that might feel a little uncomfortable. And that is to uproot yourself from your current location and locate new friends that possibly might be across a generation or so. And we'll only be at this about 10 more minutes. So you're welcome to leave your items. Maybe we can have 2 tables of people. So some of you can come over to the center. You stay there. You're great. Be there. Perfect. All right. So here's the question that we want to ask. Think of a ministry, an event, an activity at St. Mark's. And how could you envision us deepening or strengthening the intergenerational connection in that ministry, in that event, in that activity? What is, using our imaginations and our curiosity together, what is a ministry, an event, or an activity at St. Mark's? And how could we deepen and strengthen the intergenerational feeling, vibe, presence in that thing? Talk about that. We'll take about 10 minutes and then we'll come back together. All right. Welcome back, everybody. So as we gather back, wait, hold on. I'm gonna give you that. The trade. So as we gather back, we can just do maybe just a couple minutes of sharing out. And I'm curious, is there a particular ministry or event or activity that came up? And what was the idea or strategy that you all talked about to strengthen the intergenerational intergenerationalness. Is that a word?
Intergenerationality.
Great.
don't
I
know.
love that. Intergenerationality. It's a very hard word to say. Intergenerationality of said ministry or event. What came up in your conversation? Maybe just like one idea from each table. One idea from the Zoom room.
Is there a tool or technique you can recommend to us? Or is there a ministry that came up that you think we ought to be paying more attention to in terms of intergenerationality? That is maybe a new word that we've just made up?
What? What am I doing?
The technique. To find the urban birding, but to find the commonalities so that we don't dump people into buckets of just age, which is, and what did we talk about? The contemplative, the birding, the gardening group, knitting, quilting. Anything?
Yeah, to build on people's passions, regardless of their age. Martha, you've talked about that. You might want to add to that.
Yeah, I basically found that in the choir that I was very interested in singing, and there's a great diversity of age and experience in the choir. So I think that you can be nerds together, you know, on a particular area that you really love, and people who've been at it longer, maybe younger, maybe older, can help those who are just starting develop skills and get to know each other in the process. So, yeah.
Any other wisdom? Zoom friends, do you have some wisdom to share with us? Sue?
Well, we talked about the fact that St. Mark's is already doing so much that it's hard to think about what we might be doing. But we did think about what we might be doing. And certainly this is not a huge group activity, but it happens that all three of us are attendees at the Restorative Justice Council, which is meeting this weekend. And we wondered what it would be like if some kids were involved, because they tend to see justice in a very different way than people who have tried many different approaches over the years, successfully or not. And it would be interesting to hear that take on justice, and maybe interesting for them to hear ours.
Yes, thank you. Kids can be keenly attuned to justice, as Hannah especially knows. Thank you. Anyone else? Phil.
I didn't mention this at first because it's not a thing that needs to happen. It's a thing that has happened, but it's an example of a successful thing, is that centering prayer groups kind of have a reputation for being the replacement for the Rosary Guild in both size and age of participants. And the fact that the 20s, 30s group comes once a month to centering prayer, most don't come except for that one time each month, but a few stick. And over the last 2 years that's been going on, I'd say kind of half the core group now is 20s, 30s who discovered it that way, and it's stuck. So it's both the direct invitation, the encouragement to do it, and then also the repetition. It's not just a one-off, come check out this thing you might be interested in. It's a relationship.
Thank you all. I want to briefly draw your attention to a couple of some intergenerational things. You might want to take a picture of this on your cell phone camera. We have some intergenerational events coming up, and it happens that at all these events, there will be children and youth present. But that, as we note, that is not true of intergenerationality in general. But
The first opportunity comes this Sunday when we have a really fun event called the Run, Ride, Roll, where we are going to Seward Park, and from 3 to 4:30 p.m., people of all ages will find their way around the park. Kids often have scooters or bicycles or roller skates. There are strollers. And we end that with root beer floats, and it happens that Rob and Penny Reed are in charge of root beer floats this year. So that's been an event that we want to make sure people know is not just for children and families. On Saturday, June 22nd, we are hiking to Middle Fork, the Snoqualmie River. We decided that every year, in addition to our local hikes, which we all really love, we would do one destination hike. Last year, we went to Mount Rainier National Park, which was amazing, and we ranged in age from 4 to 86. So that's coming up. We have an intergenerational Bible study, not quite Vacation Bible School, but certainly a very creative and innovative Bible study that we call Eat, Play, Love. This year, we're extending the pilgrimage theme that we have embarked upon to include that. It is Friday, August 23rd and Saturday, August 24th. We do Friday evening and then Saturday morning. Dinner is included on Friday, lunch is included on Saturday. It really does take a village to make that happen. And so that's one where I could really use some help. Sunday, September 8th is the ministry fair and what we're calling a parish picnic after church for everyone. That again, that will be the work of many hands. And this year, Intergenerational Council is going to take the lead on the alternative gift market, which will be Sunday, November 23rd, which is the weekend before Thanksgiving and before the first Sunday in Advent. And so there again, I'm going to be putting an announcement out about that so people can start planning. So those are just some big events that are coming up that I wanted to draw your attention to. And now I'd like to offer a prayer from a meditation from Stephen Charleston, who is an Indigenous elder of the Choctaw Nation, and he is a former Episcopal bishop. I offered this last Thursday. I thought it was especially fitting for a conversation about intergenerationality. It's called Seek. Seek wisdom from the elders, older souls who have seen, remembered, understood. Seek strength from your peers, companions on the same path, those who know without explanation. Seek renewal from the youth, young spirits alive with possibility, alert to honesty. Seek nurture from children, innocent visionaries, truth tellers without ambition. Seek love from your ancestors, those rare spirits who can fly beside you, the trusted ones of your heart. Seek truth from the unseen spirit, the conscience more true than law, the voice that knows your name. Amen, amen. Thank you all for coming. Emily, would you like to say a quick word about next week? No, the next Wednesday.
Thank you, Greg Bach, for being amazing in so many ways, but including your live streaming and Zoom abilities. Next Wednesday, we have a special forum. It's a collaboration with the University of Washington and the Greater Church Council of Seattle and the Diocese of Olympia Multicultural Ministries. And we're going to be talking about the impact of redlining and racial restrictive covenants in Seattle, but specifically in North Capitol Hill, as we hold that as an overlay to the work and exploration of redeveloping St. Nicholas for potential affordable housing. And so I commend that to you, and to engage in this work with us together, as challenging as it may be, to see what our history tells us about the land we're on.
Nothing good.
And the last dinner is next week as well. Come celebrate.
So thank you, especially to Intergenerational Council, and thank you all for being part of this conversation and this important work.